Hello, and welcome to the True Crime Lounge. Today, we're going to be talking about Jo Pender. There's a Lifetime movie based off her, there's a book based off her, but do we know who she really is? Well, today's your lucky day. We are going to be talking about her, and we're going to find out a little bit more about her crime and who she is. Are you excited? Alright, guys. Before we get started, I want you to hit that like button. I want you to comment in case you want me to talk about next. Or some. And then ring that bell for notifications. Don't forget, hit that subscribe button as well. And also, before I continue, I do have a merch shop down below, so feel free to go check that out. Any of the color shirts is going for like a lot of the awareness months. So a lot of them are my favorite one is the murder shops is a true crime lounge shirt. To me, it's giving me only murders in the building vibes. I love that show, by the way. But anyway, let's get started, shall we? With Jo Pender. So she's classified as a murderer, with characteristics of drugs and arguments. She has two victims. The day of the murder happened October 24th, 2000. That's my mom's birthday. The date of arrest was 4 days later. She was born May 29th, 1979. Her victim profiles include Andrew Cataldi, 24, and Tricia Norman, 25, her roommates. The method of murder, shooting with a 12-gauge shotgun. In the location, well, it happened in Marion County, Indiana. So, in her current status, she was sentenced to 110 years in prison on August 22nd, 2002. She escaped from Rockville Correctional Facility on August 4, 2008. She was recaptured December 2nd, 2008. So, who exactly was Sarah Pender? Well, she is a woman who was convicted along with her former boyfriend Richard Edward Hull of murdering their roommates, Andrew Cataldi and Tricia Norman, on October 24th, 2000 in Indiana. She got national attention in August 2008 when she escaped from the Rockville Correctional Facility. It was featured on America's Most Wanted, and she was recaptured December of 2008. So what exactly was her crime? Well, Pender, who was then 21 was a graduate of Lawrence Central High School in 1997. She worked as a secretary at Carl E. Most & Sons. Richard Hull, her boyfriend, worked as a bouncer at a bar. He had a criminal history, which included 6 misdemeanors, 2 felony convictions for auto theft and residential entry. Andrew Cataldi, 24, and Tricia Norman, 25, were both fugitives from a Nevada correctional facility, where Norman served time on a forgery conviction, and Cataldi on a possession with intent to distribute methamphetamine conviction. According to the police, Hull and Cataldi reportedly sold drugs from their place, a fact confirmed by Hull himself. So, what about the murder exactly? Well, according to a neighbor, Jana Frederick, tensions between have been growing for 3 weeks between the couples Hull as Hull and Cataldi often had arguments. At some point before the murders, Hull, who couldn't legally purchase a firearm because of his records, sought to buy one from her boyfriend's son. Well, when that didn't work, he turned to Pender, who he somehow convinced to buy a weapon for him. So on the morning of October 24th, 2000, Hull drove Pender to a local Walmart where the clerk who handled the sale of the 12-gauge shotgun used for the murder saw Hull picked up the ammunition and bring it back to the counter where Pender paid for it. The next day, when went for an outing with Pender's parents and came home around 11 p.m. So, Pender left the place shortly after to take a walk in the neighborhood. According to Hull, while she was running away, an argument broke over money. Hull's sister Tabitha owed to Cataldi. Cataldi, who knew about the recently purchased shotgun, went to Hull's room and tried to grab his weapon. He said he was going to kill his blank fam. I'm not going to say the words because we're going to try to keep it appropriate as much as we can. Family later told Richard Hull to the detectives a struggle followed. Hull then shot Cataldi in the chest and Norman in his chest and in his bed. When Pender came back to their home, both victims were dead, and Hull already loaded one of the bodies in the back of his truck and borrowed from a friend, Ronnie Hare, on October 23, 2000. He needed to get stuff out of his basement because he and Cataldi planned to have a chemist from Las Vegas use the place to cook meth. Is this like a Breaking Bad episode or something that's played out? I have never seen Breaking Bad, but I just know about the whole scenario of that. I'm just saying. So Hull and Pender then drove a few blocks away and dumped the bodies in a dumpster, where they found Stoltz, or found by Steve Stoltz. So the next day, October 25th, Pender went to work as usual while Hull borrowed a plug adapter from the neighbor Jana Frederick to clean up the blood in the home. On the 26th, the couple went to Noblesville to bring back the truck to its owner, the home of which Hull burned several bloodstains. On the same day, detectives who identified him searched Hull and Pender's house. They found traces of blood and noticed that attempts were made to conceal the murders. Holm was then arrested in Noblesville October 27, 2000, which he admitted to committing both murders. So on October 28th, Pender turned over a pair of blood-stained pants belonging to Hull to the police. DNA confirmed showing that the blood was what Tricia Norman and Andrew Cataldi. No DNA evidence was found that linked Pender to the murders of which both she and her boyfriend were charged. Pender explained later that after he committed these murders, I did not call the police, but instead stayed with him out of love, fear, loyalty, and sheer stupidity. So what exactly about the trial? Well, let's start with our protagonist, Pender. She went on the trial at Marion Superior Court July 2002, and she was represented by attorney James Nave. The judge was Jane Magnus Simpson. The prosecutor was Larry Sells. Sells was a Republican candidate who had just been defeated when he ran for office to become Hamilton County prosecutor. He had campaigned stressing his tough sentencing for criminals. He was favorable to the death penalty and managed to get it on several occasions. He believed that trials should result in the conviction of more than 75% of cases. Neither Pender nor Hull testified at trial. So what about the evidence against Pender? Well, citing the fact that Pender had brought the murder weapon on the morning of the murders, and that she later helped Hull in disposing the bodies, Sells told the jury that she had planned the murder and manipulated Richard Hull into committing them. According to the Indianapolis Star journalist Vic Record, Sells likened her influence over Hull to control the Manson Manson had control over his followers, who committed a string of murders in 1969. She was dubbed the female Charles Manson and has been stuck with her ever since. To prove Pender's guilt, Sells relied chiefly on the letter alleged sent to Hull by Pender in May 2001, on the testimony by inmate Floyd Pennington. In a letter, she allegedly wrote that her former boyfriend, the woman, took responsibility for the murder. I wish I could go back and change the events of that night, said in the letter. Drew was so mean that night, I just snapped. I didn't mean to kill him. It must have been the acid. Interesting. Well, when you said you would try to take the blame, I knew that you loved me deeply. And at first, you would tell. But you stuck to your promise. The letter ended with a postscript, destroy this. Interesting. So, forensic documents examiner Leanne Hormless testified that the letter had been written by Pender. Defense attorney James Knopf said the letter was fake. He said that Sarah Pender was no clever criminal mastermind, and that the murder was not a cleverly planned criminal act. It was instead an act of the moment. He argued that Hull shot Cataldi and Norman because they were going to cut him out of a big deal. Another evidence presented to the jury was the testimony of a fellow inmate, Floyd Pennington, who had a pen relationship with Pender for several months. He testified that Pender had admitted him her responsibility for the double homicides. During the meeting he had arranged on September 22, 2001 at Wishart Hospital. So, on August 22nd, 2002, Pender was found guilty, sentenced to 110 years in prison. Hull pled guilty to avoid trial. His line of defense was he had been under the influence of Pender at the time of the murder, which was considered at the time by the court as a mitigating factor. He received a 130-year sentence. How did he get more years than her? Okay. So there are some controversies that come from this case. Well, first is the over letter that presented at Pender's trial and proof of her guilt that she allegedly wrote on May 16, 2001. Next is Pennington's testimony, who was a habitual offender and a violent felon, waiting for sentence over robbery, who had a previous record of child molesting, a crime in which he got a 5-year sentence in 1989. I wonder... Okay. So what about the... We're going to take a break here, then we'll get started to the evasion. So Pender escaped from Rockville Correctional Center in a medium security prison about 50 miles west of Indianapolis on August 4, 2008, with the aid of prison guard Scott Spittler Sr., a former cellmate Jamie Long. At the end, at the time of her evasion, Spittler had been a corrections officer at Rockville Correctional Facility for 5 years. The previous month, he had been placed in a pretrial diversion program for a misdemeanor of battery. Although he was married and had children, he was also engaged in an ongoing relationship with Pender behind bars. Long was 41 years old and married. Jamie Long was 41 years old and married to Larry Long. She had a criminal history of 2 felonies, 12 to 15 convictions. Both women had met in 2001 while they were inmates at Marion County Jail. They formed an intimate relationship, and Long referred to Pender as her wife while they served time in Indiana's women's prison. After her release, Long frequently visited Pender. Interesting. So the circumstances, well, April 2007, Pender submitted a petition for a writ of habeas corpus, On September 5, 2008, in a closing judgment, her petition was dismissed. She later wrote, "Once my appeals were exhausted, I had no hope left. I chose to create my own justice. I served my equivalent of 21 years of my sentence, and I felt that was enough. I escaped because I felt justified in doing so." So let's talk about her jailbreak now. Well, Pender reportedly planned her escape in the days of or weeks before it happened with a cell phone provided her by Scott Spittler. On August 4, 2008, Pender went into the facility's gymnasium and she changed clothes, hiding her prison uniform above the ceiling's toweling and putting a civilian's clothes on that Spittler also had given her. She then walked toward the fueling area where they had agreed to meet. Spittler told her to get in the van and hide under the seat, which she did. He then drove to the prison gate where he knew out of experience where the guard would not search the vehicle. Spittler dropped off Pender at one of the facility's parking lot where Jamie Long picked her up, gave her $140, and drove her to Indianapolis. After an inmate's count, it appeared that Pender was missing. So, the prison, which was on maximum security lockdown, and after reviewing surveillances and conducting the Garshak log, investigators identified Spittler as Pender's accomplice, and he was arrested on August 5, 2008, charged with assisting a criminal, official misconduct, sexual misconduct, and trafficking with an inmate. So, February 2009, he was sentenced to 8 years in jail. Long was arrested August 7, 2008, after Spittler denounced her to investigators as the person who picked up Pender, and she was charged with aiding an escape, a Class C felony, and sentenced to 7 years. In September 2008, America's Most Wanted ran a feature on Pender. So, in October 2008, Pender was added to the U.S. Marshals 15 Most Wanted Fugitives. She was the only woman on the list at the time. In the meantime, Pender settled in Northside Chicago neighborhood, where she went under the name Ashley Thompson. She found a job as estimated for her contract. She led an ordinary and uneventful life as an employee, which has extensively described her in her blog as the long way home. So December 22nd, 2008, 2 hours after a rerun of America's Most Wanted, her neighbor identified her, called the Chicago police, which arrested her at the apartment, although she denied being Sarah Pender for a while. She did not resist arrest. Pender is now being held in solitary confinement at Indiana's Women's Prison in Indianapolis. The punishment, which had lasted a year, had been prolonged in the Indiana Department of Correction with no set date for her release in the general population. She is kept under observation and no contact with other inmates. Pender's current release date from jail is April 4th, 2054, when she will be 75 years old. So, how did she get the female Charles Manson label? I have to admit, that's pretty cool, though. So in 2002, during her trial, Marion County Deputy Prosecutor Larry Sells likened Sarah Pender to a female Charles Manson to describe her alleged influence over Richard Hull. At the time, this comparison was relayed by the media on several occasions, resurfaced since in the online media. Supporter of Pender's claim that the comparison is inappropriate because Pender did not plan, commit, or pressure Hull into murdering Norman or Cataldi. They claim that even Pender had organized the murders. The comparison was grossly exaggerated. Manson was a guru with a juvenile offender record and a psychiatric history, which led to members of his sect to commit several murders on occasion over a period of several months. Pender held a legitimate job at the one time the one Richard Hull shot Cataldi and Norman. So in 2008, during the trials, Spittler explained that he had been manipulated by Pender, and that to escape, the commissioner Edwin Buss told me that Pender had manipulated to the point where he had planned this day to get a vehicle inside the facility and take outside the facility. Detectives said that she first seduced him whenever she coerced Spittler into helping escape. Interviewed by America's Most Wanted, once said about Pender lurking within a dark evil demon. She has the ability to seduce people into committing atrocious acts. She has a Charles Manson-like ability to manipulate people. The America's Most Wanted website made a particularly dramatic depiction of Pender, labeling her as a cunning and dangerous fugitive, and asked viewers to call before she has an opportunity to kill again. It is precise that Pender used her body to get what she desired most: freedom. The show talked about her manipulative ways. Pender has written that the media, including America's Most Wanted, has selectively used facts in order to manipulate the viewers to believe I am a degenerate, dangerous criminal in return for a sensational story and higher ratings under the guise of bringing justice. Supporters of Pender claim that Spittler was aware of the media depiction of Pender and used it to minimize his responsibility. They point out that Spittler did not act as a misguided love for a female fatale when he helped Pender to escape Rockville Correctional Facility. He was expecting a $15,000 payout for his services, a fact that media reported on neither during Pender's escape, not before, during, or after his trial. So Pender's supporters further pointed out that the relationship between Pender and Spittler was not an exemption at Rockville. The 2 months after her escape, in October 28, Roger Heisman, another correctional officer at Rockville, was arrested by state police for trafficking and engaging in sex acts with at least one female inmate. Because the case was not high profile, no one claimed Heisman was a victim and she was manipulated by an inmate involved. Supporters of Pender finally claim the Department of Corrections had also an interest in exaggerating her abilities in order to minimize media damage and own responsibility. So the Rockville Correctional Facility had facilities hiring policy had gotten to the media publicity in February 2008 when it was revealed that mass murderer Stephen Gasmasat, I think that's how it's pronounced, had been hired in 2007 to work as a correctional officer. The fact that the guard posted at the gate did not search Spittler's vehicle on the day of the escape, as he should have, Spittler's behavior, Roger Heisman arrest, and the Harris psychopath Stephen. I'm just gonna say Stephen because I'm not now pronouncing that name again. Are elements that clearly pointed out the problems within the institution, which, when considered, had little to do with Pender's personality. Supporters of Pender pointed out that she has committed no violence or any kind to prepare during or after her escape. Supporters also claim that if anything, far from her being manipulated, Pender has often been used for a variety of people for convenience. Scapegoat to elude their own responsibilities. Interesting. So how did the media take this? Well, as I said earlier, she inspired a book and a movie. And with the book is called Girl Wanted: The Chase of Sarah Pender. That was released June 7, 2011. It was written by Steve Miller and criticized for inaccurate and deliberately quoting key documents in a misleading way. In April 2001, a mail art media says Send Us Your Hand has been launched by Sarah and her family under the awareness an organization Act for Humanity to raise and help Pender, who has been in solitary confinement since 2008, to remain connected to the outside world. And finally, on April 1st, 2012, the case was profiled on Oxygen's TV series Snapped. The TV show features interviews from Sarah Jo Pender and her relatives, as well as many of other persons involved in the case. So what exactly, since we focused on Pender, what about Hull? What happened with him? Well, here's the facts from Richard Hull versus Indiana, state of Indiana. On October 25th, 2000, about 3 o'clock in the morning, Ed Leggins saw two large people, one larger than the other, the bed of a truck covering the bed of a truck out in the front, parked in front of a home at 906 Merkle Street here in Marion County, Indiana. He couldn't distinguish at the time that either the race or the sex of the individuals. Later, Pender and Hall both acknowledged those individuals were them. At 6 o'clock p.m. that day, Stephen Stoltz, an employee at Teamsters Local Union at 869 South Marine, discovered the bodies of a male and female in a dumpster in the back of a union, addressed and that just short distance from the Meikle Street residence. The individuals were later identified as Cataldi and Nordman, roommates of Hull and Pender. The male had been shot in the chest, and the female in the chest and in the head with a shotgun. Descriptions of the victims and photos of the tattoos were shown on TV newscasts. A neighbor for the four individuals, Pender, Hull, Cataldi, and Norman, there at 906 Meikle, contacted law enforcement and told them that she knew who the individuals were. Had one been killed, and also told them that Sarah Pender and Richard Hull lived at the address? Well, a search warrant was secured by Detective Kenneth Martinez and other law enforcement officers. They searched the address and discovered that, among other things, that had been a lot of blood at the scene. DNA analysis later determined that the blood belonged to Tricia Norman. It was appearing that as well that there had been an attempt to clean up the blood and conceal evidence. Jana Frederick told police that Holman borrowed a plug adapter around October 25th, 2000 to use a carpet shampoo and clean the residence. So the police found Hull and Sarah Pender in Noblesville. When Hull was questioned early morning, October 27th, he initially denied any knowledge of what happened to Cataldi and Norman. The detectives advised him some of the evidence against him, including that he had borrowed from Ronnie Heron's truck on the evening of October 23rd. The bodies had been moved in that pickup truck. DNA analysis of pickup truck showed the bed of the truck was the blood of Cataldi, one of the victims. They advised him that they were aware that he and Pender had gone to South US 31 Walmart. Pender was driven there, and Hull had a 12-gauge shotgun. Alright guys, that is it. Do you guys think she did it? Do you think she deserves the label the female Charles Manson? What do you think? I'm curious in the comments. Also, don't forget to check that merch shop down below.